Eric Shesky's Weekly You Demon.
Whoa, stop the music. Or not. Keep it going, that's fine. Big day coming up this coming Friday. It is the feast day of St. Anthony the Great. One of my favorite saints of all time. Now, for the non-Catholics out there, a feast day is just it's like a commemoration. Just remember a great saint and look at his or her life and what made her great in the eyes of God. And then we grab a goat and we sacrifice and we pull out its entrails and try to read them to find out who will become the next saint. Okay. But actually, since becoming Catholic, I've really come to appreciate the feast days, especially with respect to the saints. The whole practice of just thinking about the saints and what they did, how they lived their lives is just salubrious. I guess that goes back ever since I was a kid. I always loved reading biographies. So, as Catholics always teach, the supernatural only complements the natural. They're not going to be inconsistent unless you're talking about a miracle, of course. And I think my love of biography just naturally translated on the supernatural level to love of saint studies or hagiography. Anyway, St. Anthony, he's one of my favorite. 4th century, that's the mid-300s for you morons out there. And I love him for a lot of different reasons, but one of which is, by looking at his point in history, you get a historical, spiritual, emotional, a day-to-day living type perspective. And it all comes together in the life of St. Anthony. And don't worry, I'll try to tie all that together later, and I hope I didn't sound like LeBron James. Spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, I'm suffering. No, but I do think St. Anthony pulls it all together for us. So anyway, where are we at this time in history? Well, first and foremost, we're towards the closing years of the Roman Empire. It had gone through kind of a revival in the late 300s under Diocletian. Lots of civil wars have been going on in Rome for hundreds of years at that point. So that part is nothing new. But under Diocletian, the Roman Empire was, kind of getting its act together again. And by the way, it's the closing years of the Western Roman Empire. Keep in mind, the Roman Empire itself really lasted to 1453. For some bizarre reason, we always talk about the Roman Empire ended in 476. The Western Empire didn't even end in 476, and if you go back to the very earliest podcast episodes, I talk about that extensively, so I'm not going to rehash that here, obviously. But even putting that aside, the Roman Empire itself merely shifted capitals from Rome to Constantinople, or what is today Istanbul, and that lasted to 1453, and when Constantinople fell to the Turks, the Ottoman Turks. Anyway, you're still at this point, in the time of St. Anthony, and the mid to late 200s going into early 300s, you're dealing with the closing years of the Western Empire. So what's significant about Anthony? Well, he did one thing. He did lots of things, but he is known for one thing, and that is he started the desert monastic movement. In the 4th century, Christianity became the norm. Constantine in the Edict of Milan said, "Stop persecuting Christians." Constantine himself became Christian or Catholic. They're pretty much the same thing back then, or they were the same thing back then. Not pretty much, they were the same thing. Everyone knew at that point, the main man is Catholic, and therefore not only are persecutions going to end, you may want to nuzzle up to the Catholics. You may want to become one yourself. In 380, Theodosius actually made Christianity the religion of the empire. Constantine didn't. But with Constantine, a whole new ground shift came in, and he knew, hey, Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Church, was the end thing. Up to that point, dying for your faith was like the supreme act. It was almost like if you got martyred, because Christians were getting martyred a lot for the first, 250 years of Christianity's existence, it was almost like a straight path to heaven, but without the 20 virgin whores at your disposal when you get there. Because, Christian martyrdom and Islamic martyrdom as we see it today, not the same thing, not at all. Another key difference, besides not getting the 20 virgin whores when you get to heaven, another key difference with Islam is you can't seek it out. You can't seek out martyrdom in the Christian religion. In fact, it's kind of odd when you think about it. Small tangent here. Christian martyrdom is almost like a mix of Islam martyrdom and Hinduism, not martyrdom, but Hinduism suicide or giving it up. See, in Hinduism, there's a tradition of becoming so detached, so resigned to whatever your fate might be, that you wade out into the Ganges and let the crocodiles eat you. Or not, maybe they won't eat you, but you just wade out there. So Islam today, it's like you're seeking out martyrdom by driving the plane into the buildings, or being a suicide bomber, whatever it is. Hinduism is almost like the exact opposite. You're not really seeking it out, but you're totally welcoming it through your just morbid detachment to the point that you would walk out into the Ganges and let yourself be eaten by crocodiles. The Christian martyr has that detachment of the Hindu, but without that morbidity. The martyr loves life as a gift from God, but they just as soon enjoy it. But he has the religious fervor of the Muslim, but without the militant assertion and hatred of the Muslim terrorists. So it's kind of like a blend on most of Hinduism and Islam. In fact, I'm going to go into the existential gap here a little bit. It's like the Hindu martyr, and it's not martyr, but the Hindu sage, I guess you'd say, the guy who reaches like the height of their perfection. He seems to seek the existential gap and then disappear. It's like a complete denial of subject and object to the extreme. It's almost like the detachment of someone permanently on a high dosage of mind rape. That's the pot that they're smoking in Ted with Mark Wahlberg and that teddy bear. So whereas the Muslims like in this complete extreme denial of subject-object, the Muslim is soaked like in subject-object. It's like God object and 20 virgin whores for me, subject pinning back and forth, God, me, whores, me, going back and forth, fervently, like crazed. But the Christian martyr, it's almost like, okay, he kind of appreciates the importance of the existential gap like the Hindu, but does appreciate for what it is. It is a gap. It is between subject and object. It's a cool place to be, but it's not the only place to be. So he doesn't have the pinging back and forth fervor craziness of the Muslim martyr, but he also doesn't have that extreme existential gapness of the Hindu sage that puts him into the Ganges to be eaten by crocodiles. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. With Constantine, martyrdom was no longer likely. Any dope, regardless of his intellectual vigor or his willpower, could be a Christian. And lots of dopes became Christians, and it became fashionable. Think of it like converting to leftism these days. You're in the in crowd if you're a leftist, but it's not just for intellectuals anymore, as evidenced by every dopish college sophomore that chants his college professor's slogans. So, becoming a leftist these days doesn't take an act of courage. Like maybe back in the 50s and 60s it did kind of, although depending on how far back you trace leftism, you could say it was trendy going back to the 1800s with the anarchists and whatnot following Marx, but no matter. With Constantine, though, Christianity became fashionable. There was no red martyrdom. Red martyrdom is getting killed for your faith. You didn't even have the rose martyrdom, where people think you're kind of a freak. You're kind of an outcast in society. Back in this time, there was no social ostracism, nothing after Constantine about being a Christian. And in fact, you can even make an argument that after Constantine, it became kind of cowardly to become a Christian. It's like you become a Christian just to be with the in crowd, just to get the promotions at court, just because you want to be one of the woke people. You become a Christian. Just like Hollywood actors and famous people today, they chant the social justice warrior creed because they want to be with the in crowd. Becoming a Christian in the 4th century was the same thing, whereas just in the previous century, it was just the opposite. Being a Christian would frickin' get you killed and spit upon. So you had a major ground shift. Now enter St. Anthony. Okay, his biography is simple. And by the way, it was the very first Christian biography written by St. Athanasius. Saint on saint. I've never read it, but I guess it's a stunning book. I've read that it's a beautiful book, often outlandish, with, miracles that there's no freaking way they took place. But it's continued to resonate with people for nearly 2,000 years. The great Gustave Flaubert, or as I call him, Flaubert, the guy who wrote Madame Bovary and liked to bang prostitutes. We're not dealing with a with a Christian ascetic here at all. He pondered this biography for 20 years, and then he rewrote it, like in his own words. So with some people, this book by St. Athanasius about St. Anthony really resonates. But anyway, the biography is simple. He was born in 251. His parents died. He sold all he had and provided for his sister, put aside enough money for her, gave the rest to the poor, and boom, went to the desert. It was like 285, went to the desert. Stayed for 20 years by himself in a hermitage, came out. People were like, wow, this is a holy man. He went back in and lived by himself, came out again, attracted a large number of followers, and spawned the whole desert movement, the whole desert monasticism movement. Hundreds of thousands of people, mostly men, but quite a few women as well. There are hundreds of monasteries, and I guess to this day here in northern Egypt, this is where Anthony was. There's also a similar movement in Syria. But in Egypt, where this particular desert movement was, there were hundreds of monasteries, and according to Wikipedia, there are still 4 in existence and operating today. I'd love to go check those out at some point. Just another somewhat quick note about the Desert Fathers, because that's what those people became known as, the Desert Fathers, the ones who follow St. Anthony into the desert. There are quite a few really good collections of their sayings or anecdotes. 3 of them that I've read, or at least read large portions of. You have the Sayings of the Desert Fathers by Benedicta Ward. That collection is by far my favorite, and I'd highly recommend it. There's also Wisdom of the Desert by Thomas Merton, which is very good. And I've also read The Spiritual Meadow by John Moschus. M-O-C-H-O-S. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, The Spiritual Meadow. And The Spiritual Meadow is probably the most famous. I think it goes back, I don't know when it was first written, but it goes back, I don't know, maybe 500 years. To be honest with you though, it's mostly anecdotes, which are decent, but I like the quotes and the sayings more. And some of the Spiritual Meadow, I don't really care for it. It's always, I don't want to say it's left me cold. That's too strong, but it's just like, whatever. It's okay. But if you want a great selection of quotes by the Desert Fathers, including some anecdotes, check out Sayings of the Desert Fathers by Benedicta Ward. And I got a couple quotes here by St. Anthony. Quote, just as fish die if they stay too long out of water, so the monks who loiter outside their cells or pass their time with men of the world lose the intensity of inner peace, unquote. That's a great quote. And honestly, it kind of shows how someone removed from us by nearly 2,000 years, half a world, and freaking 10,000 cultures. Desert Fathers versus Elton John. Hey. How someone totally removed from us is relevant, can speak to us. Now granted, we're not going to have the inner peace of a desert monk living off of insects and breads. I get that. But can anyone really doubt that the affairs of the world torture the soul and leave it without peace? Can anyone doubt that? Even if you don't believe in the soul, can you doubt that the affairs of the world torture your mind and pull you away from inner peace? Whether it's the Jedi Force, or whatever you want to call it. And St. Anthony is saying, hey, at our level, of our spiritual pursuit, you gotta really, really limit how much time you spend in conversation with men of the world. But like that, we too are called to find the properly blended life. So in a sense, our task is harder than the desert monks, because we gotta get out there. is why I heard one Catholic priest put it. He goes, you guys are in the front lines day in and day out. You're out there in the trenches in warfare with the world and trying to find that blended life. Trying to set a good example for your faith without looking like a freak and thereby discrediting your faith. But without looking too frickin' worldly. It's like, Shesky, yeah, I get the fact that, you drop the F-bomb and get drunk and people think you're cool. No one thinks you're cool, Shesky. Like to think maybe they think I'm cool. And but then you flipped over to the other side, you set a bad example for your face. So you walk around the office saying the rosary. It's like, that freaking freak, this pretentious ass. And then you're dropping the F-bomb and, and drinking and having a good time. It's like, you're setting a bad example there. So, you're actually in the trenches. And so it's hard on various levels and, much less in the inner level to maintain that peace. Is it 40 hours in the office? Is that too many to keep your soul, from getting too agitated and worked up? I don't know. Like, me personally, I think my breaking point is right around 40 myself. I think I can have a pretty good life blend around 40 hours. I think my perfect would be more like 30, 35, but 40 is doable. And by the way, I chose the verb blend, like to blend your life, or the adjective blended life. I chose that perfectly. It's not a balance. If someone counsels to you that you need to find a proper life-work balance, spit on them. Don't look for balance, look for a blend. I'm going to tell you right now, the mere act of looking for balance in your life yanks you out of the existential gap. When you blend your life, you're blending work and play. Well, in fact, you're kind of making everything into play. Even work becomes play. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've been working on this for 30 years, and for most of those years, I tried to reach a good balance. And I'm going to tell you right now, there ain't no way to do it. And there's no way for a man of the world to achieve that balance. You have to look for the blend. And the blend is every minute has to be play. Or if I can be brutally honest, and a self-righteous ass, every minute has to be pray. And play and pray are close in spelling, pronunciation, and in practice. Because when you're praying and playing, you're in the existential gap in different ways. We'll flush this out in future podcasts. The existential gap issue is not going to go away anytime soon, trust me. And keep in mind, the mere act of trying to achieve balance, that in itself creates stress. And I think it's because you're kind of pinging between subject and object so much. So it's like, I gotta get this project done. I got this because I really want to go home and read the Lives of the Saints. I gotta read Benedicta Ward's Sayings of Desert Fathers. I gotta listen to Shesky's podcast, that spiritual insight. And I had so much freaking time in the office, it's not leaving time for other things, to higher pursuits in my life. And that itself creates stress. Trying to find the balance is a stressful freaking activity. Therefore, it's pointless. Look for the blend. Blend work and play. Blend it all together. And I'll be honest, I started trying to achieve this blend probably, I don't know, 8 years ago, maybe I started learning these things. And I'm in a hell of a time with it. When I get myself in the blend though, I mean, the notice is palpable. Even Marie comments on it, and she doesn't know what the heck I'm doing. She does comments like, you seem a lot more calm these days. And it's like, well, you're in the blend. And I will say, I do think the blend cannot be obtained at 50 or 60 hours in the workplace. I mean, it just, at some point, it's just too freaking much. And all you're doing is working, and no matter how much you try, you can't make it fun. You can't put it into play mode. So you might be able to bring a balance in it there. We actually have to measure it by hours. But just in general, look for the blend. Okay, so let's go on to another great quote by Anthony. Quote, "A time is coming when men will go mad, and when they see someone who is not mad, they'll attack him, saying, 'You are mad, you are not like us.'" Well, welcome to the world of being non-woke. That's exactly what we deal with today. I mean, it's like people have gone mad. Bruce Jenner's a chick. This dude wants to use the girls' room. He's not a voyeur. He's not Peeping Tom, which, by the way, is like the number one crime in America. Always has been. Something like 40% of all men admit to at one point being Peeping Toms. And maybe not walking right up to the windowsill, right to the pane and peering in. But, maybe, looking, from across the street with binoculars, climbing the trees, doing that John Belushi thing in Animal House with a ladder. It's the number one crime among men in America, and we're furthering it with this whole absurd freaking social justice warrior, trans culture, whatever the frick it is. But people like me and you and other people who think Bruce Jenner's a dude, we're the mad ones. The left thinks we're mad. So again, just another example how St. Anthony is relevant even to this day. And then, of course, there are some pretty puzzling things you'll find in these books of the Desert Fathers. Like this quote from Anthony. Quote, "He who wishes to live in solitude in the desert is delivered from 3 conflicts, hearing, speech, and sight. There is only one conflict for him, and that is with fornication." Unquote. I tell you, I would like to see the absolute 100% literal translation of that. I don't know. My hunch has Benedict Ward, like most translators, tries to make it more accessible to her English readers. I would like to see the brutal 100% literal translation to the extent that's possible. I'd love to see it. So living by yourself in the desert, you're delivered to hearing, speech, and sight, the temptations therein, but not with fornication. With whom? Not delivered from masturbation. Fornication. And in the Egyptian desert, there are also a bunch of dudes living around you as well. Not with you, but in huts next to you. But you're not being delivered from sodomy. It's actual fornication. I'm guessing it's referring to succubi. But tell you what, that's a testament to the power of the penis. Living by yourself will deliver you from the conflicts of hearing, speech, and sight, but not that from the power of the penis. Just another word of warning to those who want to free the penis in the sexual revolution. Okay, let's do some enlightened segments. One more quick note on St. Anthony. I mentioned that St. Athanasius wrote his life, and it was the first Christian biography. St. Athanasius' feast day is this coming Saturday, the day after Anthony's. At least it's the feast day in the Eastern Orthodox Church. I'm not sure of the Catholic Church. If you want to read about St. Athanasius, you gotta check out Robert Paine's book, The Holy Fire. It might be the greatest saint book of all time. It is just gripping in its prose and the details. I can't recommend it enough. I remember thinking when I was reading it that Robert Paine must have been an Eastern Orthodox monk, only to find out later he was a mirror writer. A mirror podcaster, a mirror writer. Yeah, the book is it's like a work of art, but of the worshipful sort. The kind of art you'd think would be produced from a lifetime of prayer. But no, Paine was just an ordinary writer who cranked out books as quickly as Stephen King. He was also a man of the world. He was divorced. He worked in New York. He dined with Hitler and Mao Zedong and other famous people. I mean, hats off to him. In my opinion, that book is it combines the greatest of both worlds, the immanent and the transcendent. It has a great prose. Then theologically, it's sound, it's great, as evidenced by the fact that St. Vladimir's Seminary Press keeps it in print. So again, The Holy Fire by Robert Paine, P-A-Y-N-E. Gotta check it out. I'll try to post a link to it at the show notes page. Just to give you a taste, here's the very first line from the chapter on St. Athanasius. Quote, "There are times when the dark and heavy syllables of his name fill us with dread." Unquote. And that's just a great freaking line. The whole book is like that. So, I broke my alcohol fast. It lasted 10 days. I had a drink Friday night. It just had a horrible freaking work. Marie had a health crisis on her side of the family. I just had the week from hell. I was working nonstop. And effectively, I'd gone 19 days without a voluntary drink. The last voluntary drink I had was December 22nd. I had to go out on New Year's Eve and had to drink. And he could say, you didn't have to drink, Chesky. He's like, yeah, well, I'm not that brave. I can't have the rosé martyrdom of not drinking. People expect it. And there is something, and to some extent, and I actually believe this, I think drinking is an act of charity. Mother Angelica liked to point out that wearing deodorant and maybe using mouthwash can be an act of charity for the person next to you. Well, I think having a drink and making the person that you're with feel more at ease, or at least let them know or think that you're having a good time by having a drink, that too can be an act of charity, and I honestly believe that. So New Year's Eve, I kind of had to have some drinks. But just sitting down saying, I freaking need this thing, like an alcoholic, scratching at the refrigerator. Yeah, hadn't for 19 days, but Friday night I did. I drank Hendrick's Midsummer Solstice. Out freaking standing. My law partner bought it for me as a Christmas present, and it's great. It's like a substitute for pink gin. And I will say, I've only had pink gin once before, at least from a bottle that I bought. When I was in London, I had it all the time. I loved it. This Hendrick's was not quite as good as a pink gin that my son Alex bought me, but I know for a fact what Alex bought me is almost twice the price, so I guess it stands to reason. But this Hendrick's is pretty freaking close to what Alex got me, and for almost half the price, it's definitely well worth it. I didn't use a lemon in it. One recipe I saw, called for a Hendrick's Midsummer Solstice gin with tonic, and then a little bit of lemon in it. I have to try that out. I guess that's supposed to be just great. And that's the reason I'm just digging this gin craze. There's so many freaking different ways to do this, and it goes back many, many years. And they come up with different gin drinks and gin and tonics and twists on them here and there, all sorts of subtle things. Just love it. Just love this whole gin movement we're undergoing. And I would point out, I'll move on to other things here in a second, but I'd point out that I limited myself to 2 drinks. Because when I was in the throes of that gastritis attack I had like 3 weeks ago, I was like, I at least got to limit myself to 1, 2, maybe 3 drinks. And I had 2 tall Hendrick's, and it was about perfect. I'd say a shot and a quarter, 1 1/4 ounces, I'd say. And by the way, what is a shot? I hear 1 ounce, and then I hear 1 1/2 ounces. So I don't know what a shot is. So I basically had a little over 1 ounce of Hendrick's Midsummer Solstice gin, and then a complete small bottle of the refreshingly light Indian tonic, the Fever Tree tonic. Again, splendid drink. Hey, I haven't made a song recommendation in quite a while. Here it is. The Sonics, Have Love, Will Travel. Now, I am really, really freaking late to the game on this one. I found it in a Spotify Neo Garage Rock Revival playlist. And by the way, if you're not into the Neo Garage Rock, the Garage Rock Revival, get into it. I've always loved garage rock. I mean, that song Gloria by them, or whoever claims to have done it first, has been remade and covered a bajillion times. I just love that song. I love the whole garage rock movement in the 1960s, early 70s. And now there's this garage rock revival going on. But anyway, I found the song in one of those playlists, and I was like, boy, this thing sounds like it's from the 60s, but obviously it's not, because I absolutely love this song, and I've never heard it before. But yep, sure enough, the Sonics are from the 1960s. Go check it out. Have Love, Will Travel. The Black Keys covered it. Another great version. Totally different, but it's great. And if you're interested in this neo garage rock, check out the Fratellis. My son Alex turned me on to them. They're excellent. In particular, their album We Need Medicine. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of their other albums, but that album from like 5-7 years ago, We Need Medicine, every song on it is at least decent, and some of them are absolute killer. Alright, let's finish with some thoughts on the existential gap.
Enough of the existential gap, Shusky!
Yeah, well, that's not gonna happen. The more you plumb the existential gap, the more there is to say. Well, until there's nothing left to say. That's when we become like the sages of the bamboo grove we discussed in episode 57, silently smiling at each other at the end of the evening because they'd reached the end of discursive conversation. Or maybe like Thomas Aquinas at the end of his life, deleting his Twitter account. So anyway, go back to episode 55. There I talked about how reason, logic, can't explain how I got to the CVS to buy jock itch spray and hemorrhoid cream. For my friend! I also talked about how the brilliant and learned Samuel Johnson refuted Bishop Berkeley's idealism by kicking a rock, which is no refutation at all. But Johnson intuited that he had no rational refutation for Berkeley's idealism about why the rock did not exist. So he kicked it. And that was his refutation. As we mentioned in episode 55, that was no refutation at all. So the point of all that is that experience overrides reason. Everyday experience shows us there's something besides reason and logic. There's more than reason or logic. Now you might be thinking, but Shesky, you're using reason to override reason. So who's king now? It's still reason. Well, yeah, I guess. And I can't use reason or logic to get my way out of that one either. So now we're back to the limits of reason and logic. It's mind-numbing, eh? It probably ought to induce silence. I'll turn off this podcast and become like one of those sages of the bamboo grove and smile silently. I'll become like that one sage and I'll greet guests in my house standing naked. But the point is, everyday experience combined with these philosophical conundrums, whatever you want to call it, it shows us there's more. More to what? I'm not sure, but there's more than reason and logic. We know it, we experience it every day. So the question is, so what? Well, so everything. And this is where you'll see how philosophy is relevant. Philosophy isn't stoner talk. Philosophy gives you a hint on how to live. Okay, now I'm the first to admit, many people seem perfectly content golfing and gardening and football watching and bird watching and officing their way through life all the way to the grave. God bless them. And I mean that 100% seriously. If they're happy pushing through life with no thought about these questions, great. You don't need a pretentious ass like me talking about the existential gap. I hold them in no contempt, intellectually or otherwise. And in fact, I'm kind of jealous of them. With two exceptions. One, I have no tolerance for the dude who's so into his hobby, his mind-numbing hobbies, that he insists that you do them as well or listen to him talk about them ad nauseum, taking up your time. I don't have much tolerance there. And I have no tolerance for the dudes who go to NFL games and they hold up the big D and that white picket fence and start screaming, defense! Defense! Those guys are full-on retards. So, yes, I'm kind of jealous of those people who can kind of go through life content with such pursuits. But now, am I really jealous? Or am I jealous kind of like we're all jealous of mongoloids who are so happy all the time? Now, that's an honest question, by the way. I know. It's a dick thing to say. But it's also an honest question. And I don't have an answer. At least not a full one. And to be honest, I question whether those people are really happy. There's a song from Bob Seger, the first verse. He says, until you lay beside a man, you don't know if he cries at night. It's like, you really don't know what people are going through. You don't know if he cries at night. You don't know if he don't. That's the lyric. Great song, by the way. A little later, Bob Seger became even more commercialized, but it's a really nice song. And by the way, this is one thing I just love about music, pop music, even art to some extent. It kind of gives you a glimpse into the human experience. It's a sanity check. It's like, oh, other people cry at night too. No, I don't. For the record, I don't cry at night. I cry all day and moan and complain, but I don't cry at night. I sleep quite soundly. But anyway, but art gives you that sanity check. When an artist opens up about himself or people he knows, he kind of gives you a check like, okay, I'm not so nuts. And that's also why I don't hear about artists singing about fantasizing sexually about their neighbor's clothes dryer vent. So, the fact you've never heard a lyric dedicated to that pursuit, and if that's your fantasy, then yeah, you're probably freaking nuts, or a complete freaking degenerate. So, are people really happy, hobbying, or officing, or otherwise going through life without thought? Is that indeed what they're even doing? Or are they struggling with these things just like me, just not blabbing all over the podcast about it? Which is a better part of valor there. But again, I don't know. Furthermore, I don't need to know. Reason and logic lead to knowledge. The mere fact that I can't reach a full answer, I can't get a piece of knowledge, it doesn't matter. And that's one thing you need to keep in mind. We'll never have a full answer. Just accept it. You don't need to reach a conclusion, and you don't need to judge. And thou shalt not judge. That's like the first principle of mindfulness, even in its most secularist horror versions. Do not judge. And think about it. Judging, it's all subject to object. I, the subject, conclude that that object sucks. It's all subject to object. Don't do that. Let it go. Or be Paul McCartney and let it be. Now, by letting it be, by not judging, you're back in the existential gap. Everything returns you, in my opinion, to the gap, not the blue jean store. No. Back to the existential gap. It all comes down to this. We know there's more to whatever it is, to existence, to being. There's more than reason and logic. Because there's more than reason or logic, live like it. And how do you live like it? Well, don't be caught up in the world of subject-object. Don't be dedicated to just things that are reasonable. I've been watching Curb Your Enthusiasm. The fact that I'm getting into Curb Your Enthusiasm almost literally 20 years after it first came out on HBO, that's a testament to Bill Burr. He was talking a couple years ago about fathers. He goes, when their kids get growing up, he goes, it's like they come out and they're rubbing water in their face and looking around for the first time in 20 years and they're in complete cultural shock. It's kind of like me. This Curb Your Enthusiasm came out in, I think, 1999 or 2000 by and about Larry David, who created Seinfeld, like my greatest TV show of all time. And it was on my radar screen, but never once is anything I'd possibly watch. Then my oldest sons told me I'd probably really like it, and I absolutely do. I love it. I'm only on season 2, by the way. A good friend of mine told me it gets kind of dirty, and I'm kind of bummed out about that. But so far, it's a little bit dirty, but not too bad. Especially compared to entertainment today in 2020. Criminy. But Larry David, he's a guy who lives in the world of all logic, all reason. And go watch that thing. He is constantly in these cringe-worthy social situations, or discussions, or debates, or arguments, and he is just fixated on reason. And as the old Taoist saying goes, he who insists all men be reasonable becomes unreasonable himself. And that's like half of the Curb Your Enthusiasm show. Heck, it might be 3/4. That's like one of the main leitmotifs is he won't let go of what his reason tells him. Great show. But it illustrates this issue. There's more to life, to existence, to being, however you want to describe it, whatever more is. There's more than just reason and logic, so live like it. Don't be Larry freaking David and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Learn to live in the existential gap, which is not the world of subject-object. The subject-object is the world of reason and logic. There's more, so learn to pursue it. Again, you don't forsake subject-object. Going back to the beginning of the podcast, I don't want you wading into the Ganges, wait for the crocodiles to get you. That's not what I'm saying. Subject-object exists, but so does the existential gap. Beyond subject-object, beyond reason and logic. Learn to live in it. And you got to figure it out for yourself. I will tell you, however, that I believe the answer is play, as I've discussed in this podcast and in previous podcasts, when you're in the world of play, you're kind of suspended between subject and object. You have an object, you want to score the touchdown or whatever it is, but yeah, it is play, so you're not that fixated on the object. Meanwhile, you want to score the touchdown, but you also realize it's not that important, but you do have a goal, so that kind of takes out of the subject, so that gap between subject and object, that act of being in play is perfect. And I hate to say it, but with play, you also have pray. They're not that far apart, either linguistically or in practice. When you're praying, you're getting in touch with the existential gap. I mean, the atheistic Zen people, I never really understood. I understand why they're atheists, but the mere fact that they acknowledge the importance of Zen, that they're a Zen adept, and they acknowledge the importance of Zazen, Z-A-Z-E-N, Zen meditation. They're admitting that, yeah, you kind of have to enter into the existential gap now and then with meditation to get past subject to object. And I'm just like, well, then what? Where are you going? If you're in the more, if you're in the world beyond subject to object, if you're beyond reason and logic, those are spiritual realms. I mean, it's in that existential gap where God is. I mean, let's face it, there are no conclusive logical ways to prove God exists. There's compelling arguments like Thomas Aquinas' 5 ways that get you kind of close. Yeah, they do. But there are compelling logical reasons to say that God doesn't exist, like the problem of evil that C.S. Lewis worked so valiantly to try to overcome and try to reason to. And those exercises are valuable, but ultimately you can't get around the problem of evil. How does a good and omniscient God allow bad things to occur? How does a good and omniscient, perfect God allow a world of suffering, a world of sin? And you say, well, because of original sin, Adam and Eve just, yeah, but there's something in Adam and Eve that let them have enough badness in them to rebel against God and eat the apple. So God didn't create perfect humans. I mean, again, it goes on and on and on. And the better part of logic in that area is going to point to God not existing because it's logic inconsistent. Of course, the world wouldn't exist either. You get right down to it, the world doesn't exist. The rules of logic, push comes to shove, militate in favor of the world not existing, just like it militates in favor of that stone that Samuel Johnson kicking does not exist. Just like logic and reason tell you that you never got to the CVS to get that jock itch cream. Alright, that's a wrap for the week. I hope you enjoyed the show. As I mentioned last week, I'm trying to do an expanded show notes page. Go to udemonpodcast.com and check it out if you want to read about some of the subjects I'm talking about on the podcast. I also got the Facebook page and the Twitter feed. Hope to get the Twitter feed much more active in the coming couple months. As always, thanks for listening.